Hi everyone, thanks so much for coming. I have to say, here we are on day 8 of this tour after traveling all over New England, and it's really exciting to walk into this packed auditorium and see all these amazing faces, so thanks so much for coming out. Bob just reminded me that I maybe should say who I am. My name's Sarah LaChance. I'm with 350 Maine. Bob Klotz with 350 Maine. I think the most appropriate place to start here is with a bunch of thank yous. I want to start with thanking NRCM. It's really exciting to be partnering with them for this awesome event. We've been working pretty closely with them through the years on climate change issues, and obviously been working very closely with the South Portland issue, and it's really wonderful to be seeing Dylan and Emmy working with us on this. Obviously 350 Maine and NRCM are two very different organizations who approach climate change and environmental activism and all of that differently, but we share a lot more in common than we have in differences, and that is that we are completely committed to protecting this beautiful state that we all love, the incredible planetary home that we all share, and all of the creatures and human beings that live on it. So then I have to thank the folks that have helped make this overall tour happen, that took place and is still taking place across 4 states and 2 countries. I want to start by recognizing Bob Klotz, one of the co-founders of 350 Maine. He's also the tar sands team coordinator. He's an absolutely amazing leader. He inspires all of us every day. He keeps us laughing, which is incredibly important, keeps us all in integrity and motivated to keep moving forward. And I have to thank the amazing group of volunteers that have put in countless hours. Thank all the 350 Maine volunteers that have been putting in countless hours over the last several months. Lee, Donna, Evan, Megan, Sylvia, Mike, Becky, Andy, John, Heidi, Sue, Steve, Willow, and Bessie. Can you all please stand up? I also want to thank Revision Energy. Bob and I went and talked to Phil Coop of Revision Energy several months ago and told him what we were cooking up and asked him if he wanted to support it, and he stood up and said absolutely. He got behind us from the beginning, and I'm hoping that after we all see this presentation that his phone starts ringing off the hook as we all put some solar panels up on our rooftops. I don't know if Phil's here, but and anyone else from Revision Energy, but thank you. And then, of course, a big reason why we're here is because of the amazing energy that has been coming out of South Portland. The folks in South Portland have helped raise the voice around the issue of tar sands, and it's been an incredible opportunity and honor to work with the people of South Portland, watch that community come together and work so hard to stop the reversal of the pipeline that also helps all the people in Alberta that are fighting to stop tar sands extraction. And can I please have everyone that worked on that effort stand up? Grassroots activism in action, I don't know what is. So quickly, just to speak to why we did create this. A couple months ago when 350 Maine folks were having a meeting, we started talking about how great it was that suddenly tar sands was a conversation that was happening around dinner tables, happening in businesses, and of course getting activity in our media. We thought, what an incredible opportunity to continue to raise that awareness, to make sure that people aren't just thinking about a pipeline threat. Yes, that is a real possibility, and if this pipeline gets reversed, we could see some horrible damage to Maine, to New England, to Vermont. And yes, the threat is real and the threat is significant. We've seen that at Mayflower, we've seen that at Kalamazoo. But the word threat is not accurate, because the word threat makes it sound like this isn't happening, that this might happen. that this could be a bad thing. This isn't a could be. This is a reality. This is an absolutely devastating environmental reality that is going on in Alberta right now that we need to get behind, that we need to keep the rest of the tar sands in the ground. We need to slow production. We can't afford to think about boundaries anymore. We don't live in a society where we should have boundaries. That's not how we operate economically. It's not how we operate on the internet. This isn't my backyard, his backyard. Alberta is my backyard, and it should, all of us need to think of it as their backyard. As a mother, my children, my husband, they're the wind beneath my wings. They're the reason why I do this. And I couldn't do it without them and everything that they've been putting up without seeing me for the last several months. I need to make sure that they know how grateful I am to their never-ending support. And as a parent, you know, we all can understand that love for children, and when any child hurts, we all hurt, and so any child in Alberta that's getting sick is like our own children getting sick, and that's why we created this tour. Bob.
Thank you, Sarah. So I'm going to just speak to some of the logistics, and just to give the frame, we're looking at this being about 2 hours. If we get below that, then we all get to go home a little early, but you know, this is intended to be a conversation, though it's a little bit one way coming at you. We will have time at the end for some question and answers, so if you can hold your questions during the program. I just want to state that we're with 350 Maine. I don't think I need to take too much of a quiz as to what 350 means, but for some who may not know, it's the science, the real science of our world, that over 350 parts per million is associated with climate change as we've been seeing it. And we're at 400 and moving higher and higher. So that needs to stop. And in working with our volunteers across the state, with 350 Maine, and with our coalition partners, and with many, many other people, we're really working to make sure that that number does not continue to go up. And part of it is by having these kind of conversations tonight. So thanks to everyone turning out. I have 3 themes that have helped me as an organizer. It goes back to my early days with Occupy here in Portland. And they are possibility, solidarity, and gratitude. And for me, this kind of event is about possibility. This is where an idea, frankly, Sarah deserves a tremendous amount of courage, much like our Sebago Lake event. It came from her passion and commitment to put on this crazy event. And it didn't exist a few months ago, and it very much exists tonight. So this is proof that anything is possible. And it reinforces the solidarity that we're all here tonight. And I need to speak to one specific thing that reinforces that all the more. And as Sarah said, there are many people to thank, which leads to the gratitude. Because if we don't have that for each other, then, you know, and we don't have fun, what's the point, really? So, again, I want to turn to Sarah again and thank her. I also reinforce the list she said before, but I particularly want to point out Eben Rose, who did all of this incredible artwork that you've seen, the posters. He's referred to in our group as Eben Almighty, because it's pretty impressive what he does. So just a round of applause for Eben for this. And I want to thank my partner, Katya, who has been tirelessly patient with this and at times not patient with it. And the rest of my family is the cockatiel and the poodle, believe it or not, that you occasionally may hear in the background when I'm on the phone with you. It's wonderful to be here with so many friends, many other friends across the state, including our 350 Maine partners up north, Waldo County, where we're going to have our final stop tomorrow at the University of Maine at Orono. The flow of the evening is, I'm going to shut up here in a few minutes. I will introduce Garth. Garth will introduce Ariel. And then we will move to the third component, which is the local component, where Rachel Berger and Carolyn and Dylan Voorhees, Rachel Berger and Carolyn Graney of Protect South Portland, along with Dylan, will talk about the local activities and issues that we need to consider here. The rest of the lay of the land is, again, we encourage you on your way out to access the NRCM information table, the 350 Maine information table. one of our big focuses is to try to help the First Nations in Alberta who are confronting this catastrophe, who are going up against the corporate government and need help in their legal defense around this issue. And so we're going to really encourage you to donate excessively and frequently, and there we'll be passing a basket. Please, as much as you contribute, all of it is going to that legal defense fund. There's donations out front, and we will be raffling off one of Garth's photos. Again, all of that money, Garth has donated his photo and will be given to the legal defense. There's a petition that will be circulating, and again, plenty of materials to look over. We appreciate your help. We would like, last two things, we would like the ability to have this banner that Evan made up on the stage here with photographers behind us shooting into the crowd at the end. So if people can stay for that, that would really be helpful to like this. And then, in the world of the good and the bad, the one challenge we're up against, as many of you know, is the State Department came out with their final environmental impact statement about the Keystone XL. And it's not altogether good. And I'm not going to get into all the details of it, but it looks like it's going in a direction we would prefer it not to go. And numbers of us in our coalition will be having an event on Monday night at 5:30 p.m. Down at Monument Square to encourage President Obama to honor his word around climate change being a crisis, and to speak out to ensure that he does the right thing with this. So there'll be more information. This all just broke today, but you can go to our web pages and get more information. Sierra Club is going to participate as well. So more information about that coming up. And the last thing is our friend Lee Chisholm down here. Could you raise your hand, Lee? Lee is the point person for that event on Monday. But he also is the point person for the Credo Action, where across the country over 70,000 people have committed to direct civil disobedience if the Keystone XL is approved. So again, there's material on our 350 Maine table about that. We'd love to have you be in solidarity with us around all of these parts of it. So, it has been an incredibly powerful, intimate time with our speakers. I just want to point out to them that there's cups of water up here, and if you want to share the cups, that's fine. You've been sharing the air together the last few days, but there is water there. I do want to introduce Garth Lenz. Garth is an internationally acclaimed environmental photographer, has won many awards, has been published in many publications, too many to list at the moment. But he will share with you the power of his images, and we really appreciate him being with us for this entire tour.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, all of you, for coming to this event. I really appreciate it. It's wonderful to see everyone. And I really want to thank the 350 Maine organizers that have made all of this possible. It's just incredibly inspiring, your dedication and passion for this issue, which now has become really your issue, because in a way we all live downstream from the tar sands. And I want to make a very, very special thank you to Ariel Deranger and Crystal Lehman. Crystal was on the first half of the tour speaking with me, and Ariel has been here with the second half. And they represent the people that are most directly affected by this, the First Nations people that live in the surrounding areas. And their passion, commitment, and dedication to this issue has just truly been very, very inspiring to me. And but I really, really want to make a very, very special thank you to Sarah LaChance, who first called me and asked if I might be interested in coming doing, 2-3 presentations, and I said, oh, let's do a whole bunch, not realizing what this meant for her life. And it's like, can we do 5? Oh, we can do more, as many as you want. So, she ended up doing this. I don't know, I started a little bit earlier in Vancouver. I think this is 12 presentations in 12 different beds, and I think it's 15 or 16 by the time I get home after going to Toronto. But Sarah has been organizing all of this, and I realize that the reason that so many of you are out here is because of the local group's work and because of just the tireless dedication that Sarah's shown for this. And you know, people like me get to be out here for 30, 35 minutes and get a lot of appreciation. And there's a lot of people, Sarah in particular, which are doing all the really hard, invisible grunt work that makes all of this possible. So big thank you. And I think let's give a big round of applause to Sarah. So I think I'll have a drink first. Many times when we talk about these issues, there's a lot of finger pointing and a lot of discussion of what divides us. And as I said before, we all live downstream from the Alberta tar sands. Climate change doesn't need a passport. Pollution moves freely through all of the water systems. And we need to think about what connects us. And I want to say too that the people that work in this industry, oftentimes they seem to get a little bit besmirched by the impact of this fossil fuel, the fossil fuel that all of us are creating a market for. And the people that work in this industry are also paying enormous health and personal consequences in order to produce this fuel that we're all creating the demand for. The thing that connects us all, of course, is this incredible planet we call Mother Earth, Turtle Island, a place of incredible beauty. Whether it's insects eating out a leaf in Indonesia and those beautiful patterns, or a magnificent forest such as the Araucaria forest of the Cane Sanctuary in Patagonia that have been there since dinosaurs walked the earth. We all depend on the earth for everything, and the earth provides everything that we truly need. One of the greatest ecosystems is Canada's boreal forest ecosystem. It's the largest forest ecosystem and the most intact forest ecosystem in the world. It stretches all across Canada, beginning in the east, where it abuts up against the Labrador Sea. And this is the home of the George River caribou herd, the largest caribou herd in the entire world, numbering about 450,000. Now, as we go across the boreal in Canada, we find this incredible richness and diversity of wetlands. Wetlands are very threatened ecosystems, but they're critical. They purify water and air, and they're the breeding ground for almost half of the 800 bird species that we find in North America. Bird species like the American white pelican migrate from as far south as the Gulf of Mexico every year to nest, breed, and raise their young in Canada's boreal forests and wetlands. These forests are of incredible beauty too. Well, many people in Canada don't really appreciate the subtle beauty of these forests, especially in autumn. And these forests are on the north shore of Lake Superior. They're a boreal Carolinian transitional forest. They were a great inspiration for a great set of Canadian painters, the Group of Seven. So these forests have a great cultural, artistic background in our history as well. Now, just across the border from Ontario and Manitoba, NRDC, one of the sponsors of this tour, and the Poplar River First Nation have worked very, very hard to protect this area as a UNESCO cultural reserve for all of us. All across the boreal, we have some of Canada's most famous rivers, the Peace, the Athabasca, the Smoky, the Wapiti, and perhaps the most famous of all, the Mackenzie, which flows north to the Beaufort Sea and the Arctic Ocean. Now, these forests were the arteries that the coureurs de bois, the voyageurs, the fur traders searching for the Northwest Passage used to explore northern Canada, wisely adopting the traditions and techniques of the First Nations people who have lived there long before them. Now, far to the north, the border of the boreal comes up against the border of the southern reaches of the tundra. And this is the Tombstone Valley in the Yukon. Obviously a very dramatic and beautiful landscape. And this is the wintering ground for the porcupine caribou herd. Now, most of you know probably about the porcupine caribou herd in terms of Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, and an issue that some of your conservation groups are working hard to prevent more oil and gas drilling in that area. Well, the breeding ground, of course, is critical, but so is the wintering ground. And this area, too, is not protected and has rich mineral and gas values in it. Now, far to the west, the boreal forest, the largest, most intact forest in the world, meets the greatest coastal temperate rainforest, the Great Bear Rainforest, and we'll explore that connection in just a few minutes. All across the boreal forest is an incredible diversity of the richest culture and most sustainable culture that we have in Canada, and that's the First Nations. And a wonderful thing that one finds in these remote communities in the wilderness, surrounded by an ecosystem which is mostly intact, is that these communities, people know their traditional languages, they know the songs and the dances, and it's an incredible thing. I can remember being in Delaunay, just south of the Arctic Circle on Great Bear Lake, and there in the solstice, the National Assembly of the Dene Nation came, and you could see, you know, little kids dancing with the grandmothers, the cool 16, 17-year-old boys with their leather jackets emboldened with red lettering on the back saying, "Proud to be Dene." And just an incredibly beautiful thing. And we can learn so much from this rich culture which has thrived in the absence of some of the more damaging influences of our southern materialistic culture. I had the great privilege to travel to do an assignment with a Slavey family, a subgroup of the Dene Nation. And I went on their traditional moose hunt as we traveled by boat along the Liard River as it winds back and forth through British Columbia, Northwest Territories. And they were going on their traditional moose hunt, and they found a moose and killed the moose. And they worked very, very hard, and they used every single bit of that moose, from the nose to the large intestines to the hooves, where they can make a kind of jello from the marrow. And even the bones of the hooves can be fashioned into a tool that will be used to skin future moose. And I thought, what an incredible example that we could learn from now of how to conserve and use everything. Yes, we take from the natural environment, but take what we need and use every bit of it. Now, in the middle of that ecosystem, under the forests and wetlands of northern Alberta, lies the very antithesis of those values. And that's the Alberta tar sands, or oil sands, the largest industrial project, the largest energy project the world has ever seen, the greatest concentration of capital investment, $200 billion and growing, the third largest oil reserves, and the single largest source of foreign oil for the United States. Our Prime Minister Stephen Harper, said this is an undertaking of epic proportions, akin to the building of the Great Wall of China or the pyramids, only greater. And it's true. It is an enormous undertaking. Because what is trapped under these, you know, we call them tar sands, we call them oil sands, what's trapped underneath is something called bitumen, which is a very dense, tar-like, toffee-like consistency substance. And to get that bitumen is resulting in devastation which can only be described as on a biblical scale. To give you a little bit of an example, if I were to stand beside that truck, my head would come up to there on that hubcap. That truck is the largest dump truck of its kind, 400-ton capacity, 47.5 feet long, 32.5 feet wide, 25 feet tall. Within those dimensions, you could build a 3,000 square foot home. This is a very, very small section of 6 very, very large mines. So that dump truck there, if you imagine that as a 3,000 square foot home and start lining them back and forth, up and down, and ask yourself how large a section of this beautiful place that might be. And now we move back on that same mine, shot at night, and here we have some of those trucks there and there, and even these little, like, pixel-sized lights in the background. Think of those as representing 3,000 square foot homes and begin to line those back and forth all through that picture space. Now take that information and realize that there are 6 mines of approximately that size, and land leases have already been set aside that will ensure that mines will take up an area greater than 10 times the magnitude of the footprint that already exists, which is about the size of Greater Chicago. And that's only part of the story, because 80% of the development and the land that's industrialized is industrialized by something called SAGD, or in situ. SAGD stands for Steam Activated Gravity Drainage. A complex and massive system of pipes, parallel pipes, deep under the Earth's surface. What happens is that superheated steam laced with some of the most toxic chemicals known is pushed, highly pressurized, through these pipes. And what it does is it heats up and liquefies the surrounding bitumen that drains down to another pipe that's pumped up to the surface. And what this does is it fragments a far, far greater area than the mines. It results in a 90% reduction of key indicator species like woodland caribou. It requires even more energy and produces at least as much greenhouse gas as the tar mines do. Now, the oil got from either method has been called by some the world's dirtiest oil. It's a very high carbon content fossil fuel, and it is the single largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in Canada and the fastest growing source. A major issue is the water. For every one of the approximately 1.8 million barrels of oil that is produced every single day in the Alberta tar sands, 2 to 4 barrels of water are taken from the Athabasca River, laced with the most deadly chemicals known to humanity to separate the bitumen from the soil, and then dumped back into these massive tailings ponds. As you can see, the tailings pond lines right beside the Athabasca River here. There are 19 of these. They contain elements such as lead, mercury, selenium, aromatic hydrocarbons, some of the most toxic carcinogenic substances known to humanity. And they are lined, the tailings ponds are the largest toxic impoundments, measuring up to 9,000 acres, 2/3 the size of Manhattan, and they are unlined tailings ponds. What you have here is massive dikes made up of the porous soil that is scraped away to make space for the mines. And of course, what's happening is these are leaching into the food systems. We're finding the same chemicals in surrounding communities and into the food supply that these people depend on. Now, I've been lent boats by people on these river systems and warned by the First Nations people that lend me the boat not to eat the fish that they're carcinogenic, and then find on that person's front porch 4 or 5 large fish to feed their family. Now, why would anyone do that, knowing that the cancer rates are higher in these areas, far higher than they are in the southern population? Well, the reason is that these are remote communities, some of the poorest communities in Canada, with exorbitant food prices, because that food, most of it has to be flown in. So these people don't have the choice. Their choice is feed your children toxic food that could give them cancer, or watch them go malnourished. Now, I have 2 young daughters, and I can't imagine what that would do to my soul, to have to either feed them toxic food or watch them go hungry. And the fact that that is happening in Canada, one of the wealthiest countries in the world with one of the highest standards of living, and that it's happening in direct proximity of the industry which is causing it and which is making some people extraordinarily wealthy, seems to me to be one of the great scandals in human rights abuses of our time. And I have to say, in spite of that, it's even more impressive, is that these are the people that are fighting the strongest for all of our children's futures to try to combat this, and going up against some of the most powerful and entrenched powers in the country. Now, the tar sands are surrounded by the boreal forest ecosystem, and this is generally considered to be the greatest terrestrial storehouse of carbon in the world. The boreal forests and wetlands of Canada store the same amount of greenhouse gases as is emitted in a decade by the burning of all fossil fuels worldwide. An acre of boreal forest sequesters twice as much carbon as a tropical rainforest. And what we have in the Alberta tar sands is we're systematically removing great swaths of that carbon sink and replacing it with the highest intensity carbon footprint greenhouse gas emitting fossil fuel that we know. And this is one of the reasons why Canada, which used to be something of a climate change champion, has now completely abdicated from that responsibility. Not only we, one of the first signatories of Kyoto, not only have we walked away, but we're trying to pull other countries away as well. So now we have full-time lobbyists in Washington lobbying for the Keystone Pipeline, lobbying against fuel standards. When Europe sought to bring in new fuel standards, new fuel directives to label high carbon content oil as such and tax it accordingly, the Canadian government threatened a trade war. No wonder that we are now the country, whether you go to Cancun, Copenhagen, or Darfur, at any of these international climate change conferences, we, Canada, are the country that gets the fossil fuel award every single day for being the biggest obstacle to the international cooperation that would ensure a safe future for all our children. "70 miles downstream from the tar sands is the Peace Athabasca Delta, an absolutely phenomenal Ramsar-designated, globally significant freshwater wetland, the largest freshwater wetland on the entire planet, and the only one that lies at the crossroads of all 4 migratory bird flyways. As such, again, it is incredibly critical habitat for the almost half of all the species in North America that come to the boreal each winter to breed and raise their young. It is the last refuge for the largest herd of wild wood bison, North America's largest terrestrial mammal. And it too is being threatened principally by the tailings ponds and the water consumption, because massive amounts of water are being drawn from the Athabasca River every single day, and that reduction in water is causing the systematic drying out of these critical wetlands. And they're also, of course, bearing the fate of the toxic sludge and leaching tailings ponds and the toxic burden that that is giving to all the species that live in the Peace Athabasca Delta. Now, far to the west, we saw this image before. Just over those mountains is the coastal temperate rainforest, the Great Bear Rainforest. And I've hiked the Grease Trail with the Tlingit people there, with elders. And as you pass over the height of land and you go from the dry interior boreal forest into the wet forest of the Great Bear, and you pass into the land of 10 and 20 feet of rain, 30 to 40 feet wide trees, 300 feet tall, and some over 1,000 feet, or over 1,000 years old. Well, this is the area of the Great Bear, an area of some of the greatest concentrations of the most iconic species in North America. And they all depend on the salmon, one of the world's great migrations. The salmon are so plentiful that they feed all the grizzly bears and the black bears as they fatten themselves up before hibernation. They feed the wolves and the eagles. And when the decomposed remains rot and go into the soil, core samplings have shown salmon isotopes in the forest. They even feed the trees. Well, many people call this the salmon forest. Now, perhaps one of the most irresponsible pipeline companies, Enbridge, whose disastrous attempt at cleaning up the Kalamazoo oil spill was described by your Safety and Transportation President as being an example of Keystone Cops, because over the 18 hours that they turned on and off that pipeline 3 times, causing a vast more amount of tar sands crude to dump into the Kalamazoo River, making the problem much worse. Now, we're supposed to entrust to them the responsibility of building an 800-mile pipeline across some of the most rugged and remote area in North America, across hundreds of the richest salmon streams. And a spill in any one of these critical arteries will mean the end to all the species that depend on these salmon. Now, once that bitumen makes it to Kitimat, if it doesn't spill along the way, it's loaded into tankers up to 10 times the size of the Exxon Valdez, about the size of the Empire State Building, and then they're supposed to navigate one of the most difficult to navigate channels in the world. A veritable jigsaw puzzle of fjords, shoals, rocky outcroppings, A place where a British Columbia ferry a few years ago, these ferries are absolutely minute compared to the massive tankers that will attempt to go through here. One of these tiny ferries couldn't make the turn, ran aground, and sunk. Now, the coastal First Nations people, the seafaring people who have lived here for 10,000 years, know these waters better than anyone. They are absolutely certain that it is not a question of if, it is a question of when one of these tankers goes down, should that pipeline go through. And then we will forget all about the Exxon Valdez spill, which is still being cleaned up 20 years later. Because this will obliterate a coast from the Tongass Forest of Southeast Alaska down to the Oregon coast. I found out the other day, when oil companies talk about successfully cleaning up an ocean oil spill, what that means. That means that they've been able to recover 10 to 15% of the oil that was spilled. And of course, you too have your own Made in Canada proposed pipeline, a pipeline through America to the coast for export, so oil companies operating the tar sands can make even more money and more profits. And in the process, it has been estimated by the Obama industry that Obama presidency. Freudian slip, really. They have estimated that you would get a whopping 32 permanent oil refinery jobs, and for that you can threaten your agricultural heartland in perpetuity. But what's really frightening is this network you see here. This is the incredible network of pipelines that will facilitate the proposed tripling of production over about the next 20 years. And to do that, they will, by their own accounts, by the Canadian government's own reports, industrialize an area greater than the entire state of Florida. And that will require the systematic removal of our most effective ally in the fight against climate change, the carbon-rich boreal forests of Canada, and the replacement with some of the most carbon-intensive fossil fuel production extended over the third largest proven oil reserves in the entire world. And that's why James Hansen, noted NASA climatologist, did the math and said that the full exploitation of the Alberta tar sands means game over for stabilizing the global climate. Now, these problems are reaching very, very far. Clustered along a small area around Sarnia. You've heard about Sarnia in the context of the reversing of Line 9 to take that tar sands oil up to Montreal and then down to Portland and to this beautiful area. And in Anjamong, we have 67 major petrochemical refineries, including Suncor, which is refining tar sands oil. In this First Nations community, 1 in 7 pregnancies ends in miscarriage. Cancer rates are astronomical. Twice as many girls as boys are born on that reserve. And these people live, grow up, and die under the shadow of this industry. And as they bury their dead, who are getting cancers and rare autoimmune diseases from what National Geographic has said is one of the most toxic places in North America, they get to bury their dead in the shadow of the Suncor oil refinery refining toxic tar sands crude. So we have a lot of problems to deal with. It's not just about tar sands. While we're doing extreme oil, tar sands, mining, and SAGD, at the same time we're clinging to some of even far higher carbon footprint energy sources such as coal and mountaintop removal mining of it. And now we're looking at shale gas that runs everywhere. Another extreme oil, which puts us deeper and deeper in the fossil fuel industry's debt. So what are we going to do about this? We have a huge problem ahead of us, I'm afraid to tell you. Our cities are nothing more than temples to our fossil fuel addiction. built by and for the consumption of fossil fuels. But we have to start. We have to start somewhere. And we don't have to start big. We can start small. We need to reconstruct the infrastructure so we can get out on our bicycles, get out on our feet, and stop using carbon altogether, because the first thing to do is conserve. And we need to look at how we're purchasing our food, how we're setting up our agriculture, and the carbon footprint of both our land use practices and how we truck our food. And we need to look at alternative energy. Now, I know there are issues around wind energy, and wind energy is not necessarily absolutely benign. There are no benign forms of energy, I'm very sorry to say. They all have an impact. The best thing to do is conserve, but we are going to continue to use energy. And I can tell you that wind energy and solar energy and tidal energy are a much, much more benign form than fossil fuel energy. We don't have time to wait for the absolutely perfect, immaculate form of energy. We need to do better now. I don't have the answer, but I know that we don't need more tar mines. We don't need more pipelines to tie us to the fossil fuel future that is undermining our planet. We can't afford to let tailings ponds grow and multiply and threaten some of the most vulnerable communities in the world. We need to understand that clean water will always be worth more than dirty oil. The wetlands and forests of this great planet are the lungs of the earth. We need to protect them. They are our greatest allies in fighting climate change. I'm a parent. Many of you are parents. I brought life into this world. My job now is to ensure that those lives, my precious children, will inherit the kind of planet, opportunities, and potential, and their children too, hopefully, as I inherited. But right now, every day, this is what we're leading towards. We need to work tirelessly to ensure that their future doesn't look like this. We need to be able to tell them when we're on our deathbeds, we did everything we could to make sure that this is what they got. Thank you very much.